So students, hello students. So in this session we will target the assessment procedure. Students, assessment procedure is a topic wherein obviously with the kind of the questions that we have seen now, a lot of MCQs are there. Along with that, a lot of case studies also are being put across so far as the assessment procedures are concerned. Also students, this is the area of your syllabus which is heavily important on the basis of your case laws. The case law part, students. One more particular point, students, which has been there, which need to tell you, case law recording, students, for English also. The case law recording I have done for 2 hours. Now this entire case law recording of that 2 hours I am going to put up in my Telegram channel on next Sunday. Once already it is there, so many of you would be there who would know the recording of it, and some of the students who have not got the link, for them they can do it a bit later. But I should tell you that on 18th of April you will find the case law of both the Hindi as well as for the English. 18th of April you will find the case law for both the Hindi as well as for the English, which I am going to put it across in my Telegram channel. You all know CA Durkesh Singh. So there you will find also the PDF file. In 2 hours all the case law is done. In 2 hours all the case law is done. Did you all got this one, students? So all your worries about the case law will be over in that particular session. So now on that note, students, assessment procedure. Let's start with this particular part. Now assessment procedure, students, as we all are aware that initial provision, students, are there about the PAN, the applicability of the PAN and all. So this part, students, you can just read it out about as to who is the one who is to whom the PAN is obligated. So which is the person to whom there is an obligation to obtain the PAN. So there are various person or the threshold which has been given to you. These are the person to whom the PAN is applicable. Just a single reading required, not much into this. One case law always is so something which we always read it herein. One particular case law, students, over here, and that is, students, is this case law of Karnataka High Court judgment in A. Kausalya's Bai's case. Now what is that judgment all about, students? As far as this case law is concerned, in Srimati Kausalya's Bai's case, what was a case law, students? All of you pay attention. It was being held that there was this lady who didn't had the PAN. The reason was this, that one of the requirement, can you see this? One of the requirement of the PAN is that the total income should have exceeded the basic income limit. The total income should have exceeded the basic income limit. Now in her case, students, in her case, the total income didn't exceeded this particular basic income limit. The total income didn't exceeded the basic income limit. So therefore she had not taken the PAN at all. Okay. Now there was a case wherein the bank was supposed to pay her the FD interest. So some interest was supposed to be paid by the bank, and because of that FD interest which was supposed to be paid by the bank, the question that came up was that whether the TDS will it be required to be deducted. Whether the TDS will that be required to be deducted. To that it was being held, students, to that it was being held by whom? It was being held by the court, students. It was being held by the court. Which court, students? The Karnataka High Court. That the bank, obviously what the bank asked this lady, the bank asked the lady to give the PAN, and she could not give the PAN at all. There was an obvious failure on her part to give the PAN, and since there was an obvious failure on her part to give the PAN, therefore the bank sought to invoke 206AA. Students, the bank sought to invoke the provision of section 206AA. I think all of you are aware of this draconian provision of section 206AA, isn't it? As per this provision of section 206AA, students, all of you are aware of this provision. As far as this provision is concerned, what it says, students, it says that if you don't furnish the PAN, students, if you don't furnish the PAN, then the TDS would be deducted at a higher rate, and accordingly at a higher rate of 20%. The higher rate of 20%, the TDS was being sought to be deducted, students. The TDS was being sought to be deducted. Accordingly, the Karnataka High Court had intervened. Karnataka High Court has intervened in this particular case, and it has said that where what? Where the bank, where the SSE, the payee, is not required or is not obligated to obtain the PAN under 139A, then failure to furnish the PAN because the payee was not under the obligation to obtain the PAN, then failure to furnish the PAN, failure to furnish the PAN will not, students, it will not, exactly, so it will not be required for, it will not will be required for the hardship of section 206AA. So the provision of section 206AA will not be made applicable. This is what this one important judgment, students, was all about. Apart from that, students, penalty for non-compliance 10,000 rupees. If you are obligated to obtain the PAN but you haven't obtained the PAN, then it would be rupees 10,000 in this context. Now in this situation, students, I think in the next part 139AA, mandatory quoting of Aadhaar number. You all are aware, students, that now the Aadhaar has to be quoted in what? In the application form for the allotment of the PAN. Not only that, in the ROI also, students, you all are aware that now it has to be quoted. And if there is a failure to intimate the Aadhaar number, students, if there is a failure to intimate the Aadhaar number, students, then you all are aware that this return would be considered to be an invalid return. Return and all will be considered to be an invalid return, isn't it? So that is one of the point that you should always keep in mind. However, there are certain exceptions to whom this particular provision is not applicable, and the exceptions are like non-resident, an individual who is age 80 years or above, or a person who is not a citizen of India. Apart from that, there is one more point, is about the interchangeability of the PAN. In the case of the interchangeability of the PAN, we all are aware that in this case every person who is required to furnish or intimate or quote his PAN may furnish or intimate or quote his Aadhaar number in lieu of the PAN. So he may quote what? The Aadhaar number in lieu of the PAN, primarily if that person has not been allotted the PAN but he possesses the Aadhaar number. So whether Aadhaar will work if he doesn't have got the PAN, whether the Aadhaar will work, and the answer is yes. So in lieu of the PAN, he can definitely quote the Aadhaar primarily. So that is also, students, the point that you should always keep in mind. So this was all about the provision relating to the PAN, students. This was all about the provision relating to the PAN. Now we come to the provision relating to the ROI. Can you see this one, students? ROI. Now the first, students, as we all are aware, is the self-assessment. Students, generally what happens in this case? You all are aware of it. In this case, what happens is that, please pay attention herein. There is the section number 4, which is a charging section of the income tax law. What it says? It says that the total income of a person for a previous year, the total income of a person for a previous year is charged to tax at the next following AY. So the total income of a person for a previous year is charged to tax, students, in the next following AY, isn't it? And that is one thing that you all are aware of it. Now, therefore, in the following AY, so what happens in the next following AY, students? What happens then in the next following AY? So in the event of the AY, I will write like this. In the event of the AY, first step is compute the total income. These are the events of the AY, by the way, students. I should tell you. All these are nothing but the event of the assessment year. What are they? They are the event of the assessment year. So the very first thing that you need to do is to compute the total income. Second one, students, is about to compute the tax liability. To compute what? The tax liability. The third point, students, the third particular point, so this is about the computation of the tax liability. The third particular point is the payment of the essay tax. Fourth one, students, is the filing of the ROI. Okay, and that is the reason why we keep on saying, students, that is the reason that we keep on saying that that is the reason that we keep on saying that that is the reason that we keep on saying, students, that so, students, that is the reason why that is the reason why we always say that the ROI is filed for the relevant AY. The return of income, students, is set to be filed for what? For the relevant assessment year. This is what we always say so far as the ROI is concerned. Did you all got this one? So that is how the things has to be looked upon in this context. Now if you see over here, students, the events of the assessment year, so accordingly never say that the ROI is for the previous year. No, ROI is always for the relevant AY. Now the question that comes over here, students, is that the question that comes over here is this, that is it possible for me to make the payment of the essay tax before filing of the ROI? Is that possible that before I pay my essay tax, can I file the ROI? So students, up till some point of time, this practice was not allowed. Up till some point of time, this practice was not allowed, meaning thereby you need to make the payment. You need to make the payment of the essay tax, and thereafter only you can file the return of income. Thereafter you can file the return of income. Now they have done away with this particular practice, students. Now they have done away with this particular practice. What does it imply? It implies this, that you can now file the ROI. Students, you can now file the ROI without the payment of the essay tax. So with essay tax payable also the ROI can be filed. With essay tax payable also the ROI can be filed. That is one of the point that you should always keep in mind. So so this is one of the thing that you should always keep in mind in this context. Fine. So if you see here, in mere non-payment of essay tax, return shall not be treated as defective. Okay. So mere non-payment of the essay tax, the return shall not be considered to be defective. So this is how it has to be considered in this context. Now after this, students, after this particular point is through, here you have been given about the filing of the ROI by whom. So there are list of the person whose name has been mentioned, about who is the person who is required to file the ROI. So students, I think as far as the company and firm is concerned, always, as far as company and firm is concerned, always they have to be filing the ROI. Person other than the corporate society, students, then the total income should be greater than the base emission limit. The total income should be greater than the base emission limit in that particular case. Next point, if you see here in, students, is about the person being RNOR not required to file the ROI. This is an important one, students. Just always keep in mind about the obligation of this person. Which person? The person who is an resident and odd resident. Person who is a resident but odd resident, students. Resident and odd resident. So R and OR not required to file the return of income. So otherwise he is not under the obligation to file the return of income, but either he is a beneficial owner or is a beneficiary authority, or a beneficial owner or a beneficiary or a signing authority of the asset which is located outside India. So it is about what? Either he should be a beneficial owner or he should be a beneficiary Now, what is this beneficial owner as a concept? Beneficial owner as a concept means, students, that like it is like a benami property taken in someone else's name, but the real owner is me. So if I am such a beneficial owner of a particular property, which property, students, which is located outside India, then yes, I will be under the obligation to file the return of income. By the way, who am I? I am resident and ordinary resident. Similarly, what may be the case, students? Supposingly a person who has transferred a particular property, say for example to a trust, a person who has transferred a particular property to whom? To a trust. Now that transfer students, that transfer which has been there in this particular context, just a second, students. So over here, students, so if supposingly you have transferred that particular asset, to a trust, and thereafter what the trust does, students, the trust in turn has as per the transfer agreement between the person and the trust, whatever income that will arise in respect of that property which has been transferred, that income has to be given to, say, Mr. Y. Mr. Y, who is a resident and ordinary resident. So students, Mr. Y will become what? The beneficiary. Mr. Y will become the beneficiary. Now if Mr. Y is not otherwise obligated to file the ROI, if Mr. Y is not otherwise obligated to file the ROI, now because of this particular provision, will Mr. Y will he be under the obligation to file the ROI? And the answer is yes. The only factor is that, students, that property should be a foreign asset. So that asset which has been transferred to the trust, that should be a foreign asset. That is the only criteria or the threshold that needs to be looked upon. I hope that all of you are through with this particular point. Fine, friends. So just keep this particular proposition in mind in this context. Now, those who are under the obligation, students, and they haven't filed the ROI, we all are aware that they would be imposed upon the penalty. Those person who is under the obligation to file the ROI, but they haven't filed the ROI at all. So students, they will all be under the obligation. Primarily to file the ROI. Do you all have got this one? They would all be under the obligation to file the ROI. Fine. Now, if they fail to file the ROI, then what is the penalty? So this is a penalty under section 234F, students. 234F. So this penalty under 234F for late filing of this particular ROI. So in this context, where there is a compulsory requirement to file the ROI, then the penalty would depend upon how much was the total income. That will be the basis of imposition of penalty. So whereas the total income is up to rupees 5 lakhs, the penalty maximum that can be imposed is up to rupees 1000. The penalty maximum that can be imposed would be up to rupees 1000, whereas if the total income exceed by more than rupees 5 lakhs, then depending upon when you have filed the return, the penalty will vary. And you may be aware that if the ROI has been filed up to what? 31st of December, students. If the ROI has been filed up to 31st of December, then the penalty would become 5000. Whereas if the ROI is filed after 31st of December, then the penalty would be rupees 10,000. So here lies one question that could be there, students, and always I keep on repeating this question. It would be an important one, where the ROI, students, for the relevant AY, your AY is AY 2122. This is your AY. So for the relevant AY 2122, so if we say that the due date we all know. So there are three due dates primarily. One is the 31st of July, 31st of July of 2121. Another one is 31st of October. Now students, it is 31st of October. Be careful. And third one is the transfer pricing, 30th November. That hasn't changed. Okay. So this is a due dates. Now if we say over here that the, say, ROI filed on 10 December 21. ROI has been filed on 10 December 21. Students. Fine. 10 December 21. And the total income shown was rupees 4 lakhs. Thereafter, ROI is filed. ROI is revised, not filed. So this ROI is revised on 15th of Jan 2021. Total income with total income of say 7 lakhs. So in such particular case, students, how much would be the penalty is the question. In such particular case, how much would be the penalty would become the question. So the penalty, students, in this particular case would be how much? Rupees 5,000. Many students are saying that, but sir, you have filed the return of income then on 15th of Jan. This is 2022. 15th of Jan 2022. So your penalty should be then 10,000 rupees. No, students. No. The revised return always steps into the shoes of the original return, students. The revised return steps into the shoes of the original return. So it steps into the shoes of the original return. So therefore, in that particular case, what will be the scenario? No penalty will, the penalty would be at rupees 5,000, because then it will be considered that on 10th of December 2021, the SSC has filed the total income. The SSC has filed the return of income with a total income of rupees 7 lakhs. With a total income of how much? Rupees 7 lakhs. So therefore, students, the penalty would be of rupees 5,000. Revised return never has its own identity. It replaces the original return, and that is the reason why it will be concluded that the return of income would be said to have been filed finally on 10th of December 2021 only, on 10th of December 2021 only, with the total income of rupees 7 lakhs. The penalty in this case, students, as I have told you, the penalty in this particular case would be of rupees how much? Would be of rupees 5,000. Would be of rupees 5,000. The next particular point, students, is say, now I can just create one more twist. Supposingly he has filed this original return on this date. Instead of 10th of December, the original return would have been OR. OR is original return. So if the original return would have been filed on 31st of December, and then you are filing a revised return on 15th of January, whether the penalty would have been imposed. And the answer is no. No penalty would have been imposed, students, in this particular case. No penalty would have been imposed in this particular case. Did you all got this one? And that exactly how it would have been considered in this regard. Student, that is how it would have been considered in this regard. So no penalty would be imposed in this particular case. So I hope that all of you are through with this one. Fine, students, and that exactly is the scenario. So this is how it has to be considered. With that, now let's look upon the discussion further. Now, apart from that, students, the due dates and all I have already touched upon. The due dates, what are the due dates and all in this particular context? (31st of October, 30th of November, and 31st of July. These are 3 due dates. Now, so apart from that, the loss return. Can you see that? Loss return, very important point. Students, loss return. So if you have got a loss, students, be very careful on this particular part. So students, if you have got a loss in this context, under the head PGBP, or capital gains, and you want to carry forward that loss, students, carry forward such loss under 72, which is of business loss, 73, which is about speculative loss, and 73A, which is a loss from the specified business. Thereafter, the IFRS loss of 74A, this is about the activity of owning and maintaining racehorses. So other than house property loss, students, and the UAD primarily, which we can easily see, if PGBP loss, CG loss is to be carried forward. Please understand, students, they are using the word carry forward. It implies that the set off is possible. Set off is possible. The embargo or the restriction under 139(3) is only on the carry forward of the losses, which means that if you have filed the return after the due date of 139(1) and there are losses under the head, say PGBP, so whether that can be set off against the other income, and the answer is yes, there is no issue on that. You can set off within the restriction of the set off provision, definitely you can go ahead and do the set off. But after the set off, if still there is an unabsorbed portion of, after the set off, if still there is a portion of the unabsorbed portion of the losses, if there are still unabsorbed portion of the losses, then the same cannot be allowed to be carried forward. Then the same cannot be allowed to be carried forward, students, and that exactly is the point. I hope that all of you have got hold with this one. Okay, so this is how it has to be considered in this case. Fine, students. This is how it has to be considered in this case. Now, with that, the next particular point, students, is about belated return. By when you can file the belated return? By the end of the relevant AY, and revised return also can be filed at the end of the relevant AY. So both the belated return and the revised return has to be filed up to the end of the relevant AY, meaning thereby, students, after the end of the AY, you cannot file any return of income. You cannot file. You cannot file, students, any ROI. So this is how the things has to be looked upon. Now, if you see here below that, students, if you see this particular part here below, in this context, what does it say? It says that if you have taken the profit link deduction, students, if you have taken a profit, or can you see all the big sections? These are all profit link deductions. These are all the profit link deduction. So if you have taken the profit link deduction, obviously this is your favorite employment, ATJJAA, employment of the new workman, isn't it? Then ATP is about the cooperative society, ATQQB is about that particular, the patent and all, the royalty part. So all these particular income, students, all these particular income, if you have earned, you have to file the ROI within, if you want to claim the deduction, these big sections. For these big sections, students, if you have to claim a deductions, you need to file the ROI within the due date of section 139(1). You need to file what? You need to file, students, the ROI within the due date of section 139(1). If you don't file the ROI within the due date of section 139(1), then it will automatically get lapsed. It will automatically get lapsed. And that is one of the points that you should always keep in mind. So this is how it has to be considered over here. So students, please keep in mind this particular scenario. With that, now we come to again a very important section, students, and that section is about the intimation. That section is about the intimation. This attempt, students, there is this case law is there, which to me is always an important case law, very important case law. So this case law again could be expected so far as your examinations are concerned. So always keep in mind this case law as well. What is this case law? Let's have a look. Students, in this context, students, what they are saying, intimation under section 143(1). Intimation under 143 subsection 1. So intimation, students, is what? If you file the ROI under section 139(1). If you file the ROI, students, under section 139(1), then in that situation, or any return, that is return that you have filed, not necessarily in 139(1), maybe a belated return also, whatever return that you have filed, students, intimation would be given to you. Intimation is what, students, in a way, intimation in a way is nothing but like an acknowledgement. Intimation in a way is nothing but like an acknowledgement, When I say it is like an acknowledgement, what does it imply? It implies this, that, students. It implies this, that. In the context of the intimation part. In the context of what? Of the intimation part, students. Either whatever you have put across your claims in the ROI, whatever is your claim, students, whatever is your claim in your ROI, on the basis of the claim of your ROI, that the intimation shall be sent. On the basis of the claim of your ROI, that the intimation shall be sent. So if supposingly you have made as a case of what? You have made as a case of your like a refund case, or maybe like there is no refund that is due, so that is a nil return that you have filed, isn't it? Or in some cases, as you know, even the tax due may arise. Even in some cases, students, the tax due may arise. So whatever route that you may have taken, students, whatever route that you may have taken, if on the basis of the same, if there is any sum due that arises, then in respect of that, students, then in respect of that, the intimation is also been given. So intimation is given for everything, whether there is a refund case, or there is a sum due case, or there is no sum or no dues. Even for that, no refund or no dues, even for that intimation is given. However, for no refund and no sum due, instead of giving you what? Instead of giving you this particular intimation, the acknowledgement could also be considered as deemed intimation. The acknowledgement could also be considered as deemed intimation. Now, most important point, students, in this context is that herein the intimation, what they can do, students, while sending the intimation, students, can you see that, students, herein? They can adjust what? Arithmetic errors and all, students. Incorrect claim being inconsistent with what? With the entries or information. Now this is a very important statement, because on this there is a case law, students. On this there is a case law. So in this case, students, any apparent mistakes, in a simple word, what we can say, that while the intimation is being sent, students, while the intimation is being sent, any incorrect mistakes, students, any incorrect mistakes which are being there, those incorrect mistakes, students, can that be corrected and the intimation, can that be sent? And the answer is yes. Okay. So if there is any apparent mistakes or incorrect claim, inconsistent claims which are being there, those can be corrected and the intimation can be sent, students. And the intimation can be sent. Just have a look to this chart, all of you. This chart. ROI AY 21-22. ROI AY 21-22. Return due dates 31st July, 31st October, 30th of November. And if it is a belated return, 31st of March 2022. What did I told you? For a belated return just some time back, for a belated return, I have told you that up to the end of the AY, you will have to file that return of income. This is also true for a revised return. Now, can you see that, students? On the basis of this, the intimations are being sent. On the basis of this, students, the intimation under section 143(1) has been sent. Fine. Now, the scope of the intimation and the time limit of the intimation. Now, what is the time limit of the intimation? No intimation shall be sent. No intimation shall be sent after the expiry of 1 year. 1 year from the end of the financial year in which the ROI is filed. 1 year from the end of the financial year in which the ROI is filed. So if you see over here, students, your financial year is financial year 21-22. The financial year supposingly is say 21-22, in which the return of income has been filed. The financial year in which, obviously here you can see in this AY itself you filed the return of income, which means the financial year, all these financial years are which financial year? Financial year 21-22. So in that financial year 21-22 you have filed the return of income, do plus one more year, it will come to 31st of March 2023. Do plus one more year, it will come to 31st of March 2023. Did you all got this one, friends? So this is how it has to be considered in this particular context. Now in this context, friends, over here, this is the time limit, maximum, this is the time limit by when you need to file the intimation would be given. The scope of the intimation, what did I told you? On the basis of the ROI, whatever, it's like an acknowledgement. So whatever you have done or put forth, your position in the ROI, the same is acknowledged. However, subject to the rectification of any apparent mistake or incorrect claims. Subject to the rectification of any apparent mistake or incorrect claims. Now this is a very important judgment, students. Raghuveer Synthetics Limited. Keep in mind that supposing, students, I am an SSC of Gujarat and I have made a claim in the ROI. I have made a claim in the ROI of any claims which I have made in the ROI, which is inconsistent with any of the judgment of the Gujarat High Court. So I am the SSC. I have filed the return of income, and in the return of income I made a claim. Some of the claims are inconsistent with the already existing, pre-existing, or some old judgment delivered by whom? By the Gujarat High Court. So therefore the question is whether this inconsistent judgment, students, this inconsistent judgment which has been delivered, whether this inconsistent claim that you have made up in your ROI, will this make the case for an apparent mistake? Will this be considered to be a case of an apparent mistake? And the answer is yes. This indeed, students, will be a case of an apparent mistake, students. And since it would be a case of an apparent mistake, therefore what? Therefore we shall say that because it is a case for an apparent mistake, therefore we shall say what, students, in this case? That the intimation can be sent rectifying such particular claims. So therefore the Supreme Court in Raghuveer Synthetics Limited has said that overlooking a binding judgment of a High Court in your ROI, then that ROI will have an apparent mistake, and therefore an intimation that has been sent under 143(1), rectifying what, students? Rectifying such particular mistakes, then we shall say what, students? That there is an apparent mistake. So that is how it would be considered in this context. Thereafter, students, if you see below, intimation under 143(1) shall be sent. So what would be the nature of the intimation? As I told you, there can be three types of intimation. So if there is no sum due, primarily, then in that situation the acknowledgement can be considered, the acknowledgement itself can be considered to be a deemed intimation. Now if the sum is payable, students, in this situation, then what they say herein, so if the sum is payable, students, then the intimation is deemed to be a notice of demand, meaning thereby if sum becomes payable, like for example just now which we said in the Supreme Court judgment, there are some incorrect claims, which is apparently there is an apparent mistake because there is some incorrect claims, and what I have done is that I have rectified those particular claims while sending the intimation, and because of that there is some liability which has arisen. So therefore even that liability would be called upon by sending the intimation. Now once that intimation has been sent, I now need not be issuing on you any further notice of demands for any recovery. So I need not issue to you any further notice of demand for the purpose of recovery. So no notice of demand, students, will be sent across in this case. So therefore the intimation is deemed to be the notice of demand Non-payment within 30 days will render the assessee as an assessee in default. Non-payment within 30 days will render the assessee as an assessee in default. So a question can come in the examination wherein they say that if the intimation has been sent upon requiring the assessee to pay the additional liability, then whether in such particular case the assessee whether in such particular case the assessee will he be required, whether in such particular case whether the department also will have to issue a notice of demand for that. Is it mandatory? And the answer is no. So once an intimation has been given, students, it is no longer mandatory. It is no longer mandatory to furnish the notice of demand. It is no longer mandatory to furnish what? To furnish the notice of demand. And that exactly is the point. Thereafter, students, if the refund is due, this is also a very important point, students. Refund is due, intimation shall be granted. The refund is due, intimation can be granted. In this context, in this situation, if you see over here, what it says over here, students, if the refund is due, please have a look over here in this case, where the refund is due, on the basis of the intimation, can it be withheld by the AO? Can the AO withhold this particular intimation? This becomes the issue under consideration. So in that case, students, the answer is yes. So see the equation. Equation is if the AO is of the opinion, that the grant of the refund, students, the refund if I am granting you, it will adversely affect the recovery of the revenue. The grant of the refund will adversely affect what? The recovery of revenue. Then after recording the reasons in writing, students, he needs to record the reasons in writing and what, students? And he has to take the previous approval of the PCIT or the CIT. And he has to take the previous approval of whom? Of the PCIT and the CIT. In this context, he will be in a position to withhold the refund in this regard. Can you see this particular point, students? So, students, this particular part. So, I'll just give you a particular scenario, students. Just all of you will pay attention on this part, students. I filed the return of income for, say, assessment year 21-22. I filed the ROI for assessment year 21-22, in which I have claimed a refund, students. Refund of how much? Refund of, say, rupees 25 lakhs. Now the government does not wants to issue such particular the assessing officer, students, in this case, in this particular context. So, students, coming on this particular point again back. So in this particular context, students, so if in this scenario, students, the for AY 21-22, there is a refund which is due, in my case, say, of rupees 25 lakhs. At the same time, so I have filed the return. Intimation under 143(1) also has been given, acknowledging the fact that yes, there is a refund due of rupees 25 lakhs. Now, at the same time, 147 is also going on. In my case, 147 reassessment is also going on, for assessment year say 18-19. For assessment year 18-19, where the assessing officer is of the opinion that the liability that will come for that AY say 18-19 would be somewhere around 40 lakhs. Would be somewhere around 40 lakhs. So 40 lakhs worth of liability will come from that particular assessment. So the liability would be huge, tremendous. So the question is that can he withhold this refund of 25 lakhs? Can he withhold the refund of that rupees 25 lakhs of AY 21-22? And the answer is yes. For that, the AO just need to follow the procedure, and the procedure is that, students, what is the procedure? That if the AO is of the opinion, and what is the opinion of the AO? That the grant of the refund is going to adversely affect the recovery of revenue. Grant of the refund is going to adversely affect the recovery of revenue. Then, on the basis of the reasons that he is going to record in writing, on the basis of what? The reasons that he is going to record on writing and previous approval that he has taken of the PCIT. So he will have to give the reason. Now what kind of reasons that he is going to give? That there will be a huge liability that is expected in the assessment of AY 18-19. So therefore I want to withhold the refund of AY 21-22. So if he does that, then students, yes, the refund can be withheld. The refund, students, can be withheld in this regard. So that is what they have told as far as this particular point is concerned. Now if you see over here, students, in this context, once the assessment is completed, so for AY 18-19, once the assessment is complete, and say for example the liability, actual liability is say 45 lakhs, then whether the refund which he has withheld, can that refund, students, can it be adjusted against this particular demand of say 45 lakhs, of the demand of say rupees 45 lakhs? And the answer is yes. So on the completion of assessment, can the refund withheld be adjusted by the AO against the liability determined for the assessment? Yes. The only thing he needs to do, he needs to intimate the assessee about such adjustment that he needs to make, about such adjustment that he needs to do. So that is it, students, that he will do it. After that, students, comes your notice. The next particular part, students, is the notice. Students, there are two types of more important notice which you should aware of it. One is the notice of scrutiny under 143(2) and one is the notice under 142(1). Notice under 142(1). Notice of scrutiny, very popularly, students, you may be knowing is this, that the objective of the notice of scrutiny, students, what is the objective of notice of scrutiny? The object of the notice of scrutiny is to verify whether there is an understatement of the income, or whether there is a computation of any excessive loss, or there is any underpayment of the taxes. So all these are, students, the very objective of why the notice of scrutiny are being served upon. Why the notice of scrutiny are being served upon. Students, at the same time, students, the notice of scrutiny primarily can only be given if the assessee has filed the ROI. So unless and until the ROI has been filed, the notice of scrutiny, students, cannot be given. Obviously, because you need to scrutinize what? Something needs to be scrutinized. So what is that you need to scrutinize? It is the ROI. So therefore, the filing of the ROI is mandatory. The filing of what? The ROI, students, is mandatory under section 139(1). Okay, only then the notice of scrutiny can be given. What is the objective of the notice of scrutiny? To see whether there is an understatement of income, to see whether there is a computation of any excessive loss, or to check whether there is an underpayment of the tax. These are the objectives on the basis of which the notice of scrutiny are being served upon. And students, the time limit of the service of the notice of scrutiny, is the 6 months from the end of the financial year. 6 months from the end of the financial year in which the ROI has been filed. 6 months from the end of the financial year in which the ROI has been filed. So this happens to be what, students? The time limit in this regard. Now, students, if you see over here, non-compliance with the above notice shall attract penalty. Non-compliance, students. Read this one, students. All of you. So students, in this context, Notice of scrutiny, therefore, you have seen that non-compliance, the understatement of income, computation of excessive loss, and underpayment of the tax. The next point, students, is very, very important in the case of notice of scrutiny is about the fact that the time limit, can you see, students, the time limit of service of the notice of scrutiny, students. We have the time limit for the service of the notice of scrutiny. Service. So the notice of scrutiny should be served within the within what? Within what? Within the 6 months from the end of the financial year in which the ROI under 139 has been filed. Please be careful that they are focusing upon the service of the notice of scrutiny. The focus or the emphasis is upon the service of the notice of scrutiny, and that focus is for the time limit is for the 6 months from the end of the financial year in which the ROI is filed. 6 months from the end of the financial year in which what? The ROI has been filed, and that is how the things would be considered. The next particular point, students, which you should be careful about this one. All of you should be very careful about this particular point. What they are trying to say in this context, students, what they are trying to say in this particular context is this, that supposingly 6 months from the end of the financial year, say for example, students, your financial year in which you have filed the ROI, the financial year is 21-22, you do 6 months, it comes to 30th September 2022. So 30th September 2022 is the latest time wherein you need to serve. So it is about the service of the notice of scrutiny. The service of the notice of scrutiny should have happened or taken place up to 30th September 2022. Up to 30th September 2022. That the service of notice of scrutiny should be taken place. Service of notice of scrutiny that should have been taken place. Fine, students. Now if you see very carefully, if you all will see, students, very carefully in this case, what did I told you is that 30th September 2022 that the notice should have been served. 30th September 2022 that the notice should have been served. Fine, students. Notice should have been served. The point which is to be considered over here is this. The point that is should be considered, if supposingly I have issued the notice on the AO has issued the notice of scrutiny on 29th of September from his office, but actually it got received on 1st of October 2022 to the SSE, and obviously the service is now on 1st of October. The service is now on 1st of October, so that is after the time limit of 30th September. After the time limit of 30th September. So now, students, after 30th September, if the service has taken place, which is in my example is 1st of October, which in my example, students, is 1st of October. So the SSE should object to this notice of scrutiny. Here the SSE should object to the notice of scrutiny, isn't it? Should object to the notice of scrutiny. Now, instead of objecting to the notice of scrutiny, students, which is given to him on 1st of October, he is doing what? He is not saying anything. He is doing the compliance. He is cooperating to the AO. And once after the AO has passed the order, and if the order is an adverse order means going against SSE, that he is now wants to challenge this particular notice of scrutiny. So now he wants to challenge the notice of scrutiny, students. Can he now challenge the notice of scrutiny in this regard? And the answer is no. If you haven't laid the objection about the validity of the notice before the assessing officer, if you haven't put up the objection about the validity of notice before the assessing officer, students, then in that particular case you will not be allowed to object about the notice of scrutiny after what, students? After the order has been passed. So you will not be allowed. This provision is, students, under section 292BB. Students, this is the point. See what they have to say, all of you. No objection can be raised no objection can be raised after completion of the assessment for improper serving of notice or notice served after the expiry of time limit or not served upon him if the assessee has appeared and cooperated during the assessment under 292BB. Under 292BB. So students, it therefore implies that the assessee will have to object about the validity of the notice before the assessing officer. That is, before he passes the order of the assessment. If he does not put across his objection before the AO, then the notice would be deemed to be valid. The notice would be deemed to be valid and the assessee would be stopped to lay his objection as to the validity of the notice of scrutiny. He would be stopped to lay his objection as to the validity of the notice of scrutiny. So that is how the things has to be looked upon. Now if you see over here, students, the order of assessment. Students, the order of assessment. Now if you see about the order of assessment, students, can you see over here? Scrutiny assessment order under 143. So order is passed under 140. This is known as to the regular assessment order. There are assessment, students, is of two types. Herein I will just put across to all of you. Be very careful. So assessment, students, is about two types. One is about this special assessment. Sorry, the regular assessment. And another is about the special assessment. So far as the regular assessment is concerned, students, regular assessment, again you have 143 and then 144. 143 is about the scrutiny assessment and 144 is about the best judgment assessment. 144 is about the best judgment assessment. Now this special assessment, students, which has been there, again it is income escaping assessment 147 and 153 is about, students, assessment in consequence of search. Assessment in consequence of search. So as they say, regular assessment and the special assessment, 143 and 144, scrutiny assessment and the best judgment assessment. Okay, that is one. Second is the special assessment 147 and 153A. So that is the second particular part. In this particular context, students, in this particular context that we do have, students, you have to be very careful about this particular aspect, and that is about in the case of 143 and in the case of 144, which has been given. How is it that we will be looking at now, students, in this regard? As it goes, regular assessment 2-part, special assessment again 2-part. Fine. Now the time limit, students, here the best part is that the time limit of completing the assessment, just right here in the time limit to complete the assessment for this is section 153.1. Students, many students complain, sir, about the time limit. We are very terrified about the time limit. Students, at least for the completion of assessment, you need to know the time limit. The time limit here, students, to complete the assessment in this case is 153.2, is under section 153 subsection 2, and the time limit over here to complete the assessment is in 153B. So I'm just putting across the time limit straight away, but at least this much is the minimum that you should know so far as your examinations are concerned. Students, this is the minimum that you should all be knowing so far as the examination is concerned. The time limits. Penalty time limits you can skip. Then if you want to write other time limits, I'll just give you in writing. Other time limits that you should know is the rectification time limits. The rectification time limit by Income Tax Authority. The rectification time limit by Income Tax Authority, ITAT and Settlement Commission. ITAT and Settlement Commission. So these are the three particular cases, students. Again, the same issue will arise, the time limit part. You have to be extremely careful. Rectification time limit by whom? By the Income Tax Authority, ITAT and Settlement Commission. So these time limits, students, you need to remember so far as the examinations are concerned. Okay. Now coming back to this particular provision itself. Now if you see over here, students, if you can have a look to this particular part. So there is a scrutiny assessment order, and then there is a best judgment assessment under 144. Scrutiny assessment 143, best judgment assessment 144. Now students, as you know, the best judgment assessment will occur if there is a failure on some of the event. Like for example, you have not filed the ROI, or there is non-compliance of the scrutiny of notice. There is a non-compliance of what? Scrutiny of notice, plus special audit direction which has been given. In that special audit direction also there is a lot of non-compliances. So all these are the ground, students, which will attract the best judgment assessment. All these are the grounds which will attract the best judgment assessment. So the assessing officer, what he needs to do? The assessing officer needs to collect all the materials. He needs to gather all the materials from these particular proceedings. He will have to gather all the materials, and on the basis of the materials so gathered, he will have to pass the order of assessment. He will have to pass the order of assessment. Okay, so that is one thing that also you should always keep in mind. Now below this, power of JCIT to issue the direction to the assessing officer under 144A. Now this part I will just do a bit later on, but I was just talking about the time limit 153.1. Please have a look. So you need to remember this time limit, because for earlier AYs we had a different time limit, but with effect from AY 1920 or later years, the time limit for the purpose of completion of the assessment under 143 and 144 is 12 months from the end of the relevant AY. 12 months from the end of the relevant AY. Okay, so that is one of the point that you should always keep in mind. The time limit is 12 months from the end of the relevant AY, students. That is one point that you should always keep in mind. Now, if you all know, students, the transfer pricing case, if there is a transfer pricing matter, then this 12 months would be increased by another 12 months. So therefore it will become what? 24 months from the end of the relevant AY. 24 months from the end of the relevant AY. So that is the point which has been there. Now students, just pay attention to one important point. Here, if you see one very important paragraph. And what is that? I'll just highlight that particular paragraph for all of you. AO on the basis of the material gathered and evidence produced by the SSC. So on the basis of the material gathered and the evidence produced by the SSC, he is passing the order under 143 scrutiny assessment. scrutiny assessment. Students, even in the case of 144, if you can see, even in the case of 144, if you can see, the AO on the basis of material gathered, the AO on the basis of what? The material gathered, primary students. AO on the basis of the material gathered, he will be passing the order. He shall be passing the order under section 144. Under section 144. So please have a look to these 2 points. One is 143 and another is 144. In both these particular cases, the assessing officer, on the basis of the material that he has gathered, the assessing officer, on the basis of what? The material that he has gathered, he will pass the order. How about the intimation, students? How about the intimation? Is the intimation also on the basis of the material gathered, or it is on the basis of the ROI? It is on the basis of the ROI. So see the difference. Intimation is on the basis of the ROI, whereas the order of assessment under 143 and 144 is on the basis of the material gathered by the AO. And therefore, we will say and conclude, students, we will say and conclude that the intimation cannot be considered to be an order of assessment. Do you all agree? The intimation, students, cannot be considered to be an order of assessment. Please take one sentence, write that sentence, all of you. The intimation shall not be considered. The intimation shall not be considered as the order of assessment. The intimation cannot be considered as the order of the assessment. Whether the whether the intimation can be considered as an order of assessment, whether the intimation can be considered as an order of assessment, answer is no. Answer is no. Since an intimation sent under 143 subsection 1, since the intimation sent under section 143 subsection 1 is only on the basis of the intimation is only on the basis of the ROI, whereas the assessment under section 143 subsection 3 is on the basis of the material gathered is on the basis of the material gathered by the SSC. On the basis of the material gathered by the AO. On the basis of the material gathered by the AO. Full stop. Full stop. Fine, students. So obviously, these two are different things, but in the examination they have targeted once whether the intimation can it be considered to be an order of assessment. You will have to say the answer is no. This is the reason. Now, students, one point before now we go to our next discussion. All of you will pay attention to this. So here is a case where so students, ROI has been filed for say AY. Relevant AY is AY 21-22. Fine. Thereafter students, intimation students is also been given. Intimation is also being given. After that, notice of scrutiny is served. Notice of scrutiny is served, and finally the order is passed. And finally the order is passed. Fine, students. So these are the various pointers. These are the various pointers. Now, students, in this context, can you see this particular part? This 143.2 and 143. This 143.2 notice of scrutiny is served. Now, please be careful and be aware that once the notice is given, that the proceeding starts. Students, always keep in mind this, that once the notice is given, that the proceeding begins. So proceeding starts from here. Once the notice is given, that the proceedings begins. So it starts from when the notice is given, and when that particular proceeding is over, when the order is passed. So proceeding is completed. Proceeding completed. So this is a start point, and then this is the end point. This is a start point, and this is the end point. And students, this is the pendency. This is what we know. Tell you, you say that this is a pendency. This is what we tell this to be a pendency. Now, just now, students, you have read that the order is to be passed on the basis of what? Order is passed, students. Order is passed after collecting all materials. All materials. So therefore the question is, if the order is passed after collecting all the materials, question therefore is how the materials are being collected then? How the materials are being collected then, students? So therefore the materials are being collected, students. Be very careful. The materials are being collected, students, by virtue of exercising the power. So the power is and that power is exercised, say for example, during the pendency. So the power is exercised by the AO. to collect the materials power is exercised by the AO to collect the materials. So the question is, what are the various powers which are available? Power is exercised by the AO to collect the materials. So therefore the question is, what are the various powers? In this context. So power is exercised, students, by the assessing officer to collect the materials. So that is one point that you should always keep in mind, that the order is passed after collecting all the materials, which is what we have found out in 143 and 144. Which is what we have found out in 143 and 144. Now, that particular collection of materials has to be on the basis of some power which the AO will have to exercise. So what are the section which gives the AO those power to collect the material, students? Let's have a look. I'm giving you the list of the sections. So herein, primarily, the power exercised to collect the materials, students. Power exercised to collect the materials. So what are the power which is exercised? I'll give it, split it into two parts. One is 133, 131, 133A and 133B. Here is 144A, 127, 142A and 142A. So these are the various sections where the AO will exercise the power, on the basis of which the material shall be gathered. Students. On the basis of which the materials shall be gathered. Now students, 133, starting up with section 133, what it says, the power to collect for information. Now this notice, students, you can give to any person. To any person, students, you can give this notice and you can collect the information. That is the sort of this particular section gives the power, students. That is, you can give the notice to any person तो स्टूडेंट्स इसको मैं कनेक्ट करता हूँ अगले वीडियो में. I'll just connect this in my next video. ठीक है, I'll just connect this particular point in my next video.